There are so many wonderful things happening right now. I can hardly contain myself. And the wonderful things I'm most concerned about are things within the federal government. Oh yeah, I'm thrilled that the border is getting secured and all that stuff's necessary. We need that to save the country. But in the end, we have roughly 3 million employees in the federal government. Well over 90% of them vote Democrat every time. Let's be generous. Let's be generous and assume half of those aren't communist activists. What does that mean? It means we have well over 1 million communist activists in our lives. They are in our lives, and in small ways, they rule over us. The bureaucracy of this country has been allowed to run free forever. So how this works, as we've talked about before, is Republican presidents, Democrat presidents, it doesn't matter. If nobody goes after the bureaucracy, they are the actual rulers who will make the policy. They'll make the policy because of the checks they hand out and don't hand out, you see. And so before we get to specifically the FBI, let's just do a little something here. You ever read the book Ordinary Men? I've told you about this book before. Don't worry, I'm not going to go into a big book review here, but there's a horrible part of the book. I mean, most of the book is horrible. It's about Nazis shooting Jews in the head. It's an awful book. It's an awful book, but it's a very revealing book about human nature. I'll fast forward through most of the book and get to the end, what I've always hated so much. You get to the end, and there was this reserve battalion of Nazis. Actually, they were just German army guys, reserve German army guys, and they spend the whole book murdering everybody they can find. But in the end, they didn't go to trial. I know we all know about the Nuremberg trials, and we're picturing all these Nazis who are getting strung up, but most did not. In the end, the accountants took off the uniform and they went back to being accountants. In the end, the lawyers took off the uniform, went back to being lawyers. They didn't live the rest of their lives in shame. They didn't live in prison. They weren't executed for their terrible crimes. They simply took the uniform off and went right back into German society. That part has always bothered me so much. So let's talk about what we have here in our country. No, by the grace of God, we have not had a Holocaust here where the secret state police are shooting people in the back of the head and throwing them into ditches. But we have evil forces inside of our government here who have done evil with the power they've been given. Do I need to remind you what the FBI has been doing in recent years?
That attack, that siege, was criminal behavior, plain and simple, and it's behavior that we, the FBI, view as domestic terrorism.
In the FBI's view, the top domestic violent extremist threat comes from racially or ethnically motivated violent extremists, specifically those who advocated for the superiority of the white race.
Domestic violent extremism is the most acute threat, terrorism-related threat that we are seeing to our homeland. And as President Biden so powerfully put it, words do matter. Leadership matters.
Why'd they say all that? Why'd they go that route? Well, it's very simple. I believe, and will always believe, not that I think we'll ever know, I believe that January 6th was their Reichstag fire. The Reichstag fire, speaking of Germany, it was the fire that it burnt down Germany's Congress, their Congress building. It burnt down their building. And the Nazis used that fire as justification to turn government power against their domestic political enemies. And they went and arrested and murdered a bunch of people. I will always believe that the United States government did January 6th, organized it, planned it, instigated it, wanted it to happen. They wanted it to happen because, like all communists, they wanted to turn the guns of the government against their political opponents. And like all communists, they knew they had to find some sort of a justification for that, because they know, even the Soviets knew this, the people were going to be watchful of that. Hey, wait a minute, are they just using this for more political power? And so just like the Soviets, just like Mao did, just like the East Germans did, just like all of them did, they had to come up with a reason, with an excuse. Hey, we got no choice. And so they did January 6th, and then they began to hunt down their political opponents to arrest, intimidate, and destroy the lives of people who oppose them. They even ran, news programs talking about how let's do sedition hunters.
Sandy, not her real name, joined a massive citizen effort to identify the individuals who broke into the Capitol. She's been directly responsible for helping to put people behind bars, and she now has to hide her identity for fear of retaliation. Sandy is today part of an informal community of dozens of ordinary Americans who came to be known as sedition hunters. Over time, they developed their own methodologies, guidelines, even a software application to keep track of every individual rioter, giving each one a pseudonym and compiling dossiers of evidence that they then turned over to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, along with the rioters' real identity.
Evil. The government's secret police agency enlisting Americans choosing to participate on gathering intelligence, informing on their fellow Americans. Evil, wholly evil. Stuff you would see in East Germany, in the Soviet Union. And it happened right here in the United States of America. And that brings us specifically to the FBI. You see, you don't get excuses. I was just following orders was never, ever, ever allowed as an excuse for the Nazis. It wasn't allowed by the Japanese during their war crimes trials post-World War II. It simply does not work. In fact, when I was in the Marines, we were told we had a duty not to follow unlawful orders. If we were given an unlawful order, we knew we were supposed to say no, no, sir. But the numbers we have are staggering. Thousands of FBI agents, thousands of them were assigned to and worked willingly to destroy the lives of January 6 protesters. While the drug trafficking, the human trafficking, the kidnapping, the violence took place, tore this country apart for 4 years, the Federal Bureau of Investigation dedicated 40% of its field agents to hunting down peaceful people who sauntered into the Capitol. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is an evil secret police agency, and the agents who have committed these crimes should not in any way be allowed to take off the uniform and fade back into society. They should be arrested and prosecuted for crimes against their country. And the system understands full well how important the FBI is to ensuring communist rule in this country. That's why Rachel Maddow's on TV freaking out.
But beyond that, they appear to be targeting all the FBI agents who were involved in any of the cases brought against January 6th rioters. And to put this in perspective, the January 6th riot cases make up the largest single investigation ever in the history of the Bureau. The January 6th cases are the largest criminal caseload ever assembled by the Department of Justice. If they are going to try to purge every FBI agent who took any part in any one of these well over 1,000 cases, that's kind of the whole FBI. I mean, not every single member of the FBI, but certainly most of the FBI.
Most of the FBI. The guns of the United States government have slowly but surely been turned inward, and now they're all aimed at the political opponents of Democrats. And the men who held those guns must be punished. They must be punished not just for justice sake, they must be punished for the future of this country. Because the next FBI agent, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, when he's thinking about doing something evil, just because some dirtbag communist leader told him to do so, he should be able to look back on what happens to these agents and say to himself, no, I'm not following that order. I don't want to end up in prison. And so I need everybody in the government, in the media, every member of the system to understand this about me. I'm thrilled that you're afraid. Andy McCabe goes on television and talks about how the FBI's in disarray, and this is supposed to be some sort of sob story about these agents and their pensions. I saw this segment, I stood up and cheered.
I've talked to more FBI people in the last 4 days than I did in the prior 4 years. As John has described it accurately, it is a place in utter disarray right now. People are worried about, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to support my family? If I lose, if you're anywhere in the middle of that career, not close to retirement, if you get fired, you're done. That's the end of your reputation, your ability to get a new job. You lose your pay, you lose your chance at a pension, you lose your health insurance. This is a moment of terror for these people. It is absolutely disgraceful that they are being put through this in the middle of some political gamesmanship or active retribution. They don't deserve to be treated this way. It's unlawful and it's disgusting.
Oh, are they living in terror? What about their pensions? Oh, they'll have to find new jobs. My heart is just absolutely breaking for these members of the Stasi. Their tears nourish me. And maybe, just maybe, you feel this tug of sympathy for these people. Oh, they're losing their livelihoods. Allow me to reintroduce you to Elvis Chan, the FBI special agent who coordinated the Federal Bureau of Investigation leaning on Facebook to censor damaging information about Joe Biden so he could win an election. And after he got done using his FBI position so Democrats could win an election, he went on television and bragged about it.
I was very involved. Our field office, FBI San Francisco, was very involved in helping to protect the U.S. elections in 2020. And I think we can all agree, or I think many of us can agree, that it was a very safe election. We talked with all of these entities I mentioned regularly, at least on a monthly basis, and right before the election, probably on a weekly basis, right? If they were seeing anything unusual, if we were seeing anything unusual, sharing intelligence with technology companies, with social media companies, so that they could protect their own platforms, right?
Don't feel an ounce of sympathy for the members of the secret police now that they're being forced to take their uniforms off. Being fired is not even the bare minimum of what should happen to these people. Being fired should be just the beginning. Every single one of them should be lawyering up, because if you use your position with the secret police to attack the political opponents of Democrats, you should spend the rest of your life in federal prison. All that may have made you uncomfortable, but I am right. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're gonna start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.